So we're in your U.S. history book in Chapter 5, Section 2, and we're going to be talking about the colonists forming a united front, going over the Townshend Acts, the Boston Massacre, the repeal of the Townshend Acts, committees of correspondence, the Boston Tea Party, intolerable acts, the spirit of unity, the colonist rights, and Patrick Henry's challenge. So we're going to find out a lot about all these things. So you see in the picture, this is the Boston Massacre right in Boston, and this is the Boston Tea Party. And these things happened before the United States was a nation, and actually prompting the United States to come to challenge and declare independence. So here we have Patrick Henry, and we'll talk about his challenge at the end. So let's begin. So the Townshend Acts of 1767. Well, who was Charles Townshend? Well, he was in Great Britain there. We see a picture of him right here in 1725 to 1767. You can see with his hidden hand, you know, always think of Mason when you think of that. But anyway, he was the official in charge of the Treasury of England. And so he thought that the colonies should be paying more money to support the total British Empire. So he put more taxes on America, external taxes on imported goods such as paint, lead, glass, and tea. And we'll go on to some more after that even. The Townshend established a board of customs then, and this board was to make sure that Americans were paying all their taxes to England and to prosecute them in England if they were not. Not too fair, is it? So these new laws were made too, not only to establish the customs board, but also to search ships in America. So to make sure that the American ships weren't smuggling any untaxed things into America. And so they could just come on a ship and search American ships for no good reason. Of course, the colonists protested and all this and thought, what is going on here? And you can see here's a picture of a colonist looking and say, what is this tax on tea? So, of course, this is just the beginning. Taxation without representation, of course, is one of the reasons that we would declare independence, but there are also many others. And we will see how that, in fact, that was like only number 17 on the list. But let's go on. The colonists react. First, a man named John Dickinson, a patriot in America, and he wrote a pamphlet or papers, he said, from the Federalist Papers, letters from a farmer. And under these letters from the farmer is really saying how a farmer would stand up and say, what's going on here? Why am I being taxed on these items? And so he brought this to Americans, so Americans reading it could say, oh, what is going on with us personally? So the protection, he believed the protected taxation should not be taxation without representation. We should have a say in what we're being taxed about, right? That's our view in America. Well, John Dickinson, he lived 1732 to 1808. He was a Pennsylvania lawyer. And in writing these, he wrote the letters from a farmer in Pennsylvania to the British colonies, basically saying, this is what the farmers in America are saying about what you're doing to us here by taxing us so harshly. So, and of course, he denied the right of Parliament to legislate colonies. Like Parliament, how could they come and tell the colonies what to do? The king had a charter of the colonies, but not the Parliament. And so basically saying Parliament has no right to legislate or make laws for us here in America. So he rejected internal and external taxation in his letters from a farmer to Great Britain. So remember, John Dickinson there. And then in Boston, that's in Pennsylvania, but now in Boston we have Samuel Adams. You can look at Samuel Adams because, our family is actually related to Samuel Adams, and he indeed was a great patriot. Well, Samuel Adams drafted the Boston letter that was opposing these Townshend Acts. And Great Britain failed to respond to anything that Samuel Adams said. The colonists then began boycotting. Boycotting means they refused to buy British goods. Said, okay, we're not going to buy any of your goods, anything that you send over here anyway. So to be taxed on things, we're not buying them. And then we find that violence would break out in the midst of Boston. So think of Boston. This is where everything's settled, in Boston, Massachusetts. And the British sent in troops now to Boston, knowing what is going on. These basically sending troops to Boston because of Samuel Adams' letter, and what is going on, and basically thinking we're going to make sure that Boston, Massachusetts toes the line and that they actually pay all their taxes. So, and sent troops there. I like this picture of Samuel Adams down here. Among the natural rights of the colonists are these. First, a right to life. Second, a right to liberty or freedom. And thirdly, to property, together with the right to defend them in the best manner they can. Basically, Samuel Adams, true patriot, saying Americans have rights, the same rights as an English person would have in Great Britain. So here's the Massachusetts. It was called a circular letter that went around, that Samuel Adams put around, that basically told of liberty, of America's rights of liberty. The Boston Massacre. So what's this? So when you say massacre, you think, oh man, did a lot of people get killed or what? We'll find out not. But the Boston Massacre is the beginning of harsh relationships with England and the colonists of America. On March 5th, 1770, this Boston Massacre happened. But prior to this, 2 years prior to this, in 1768, the British arrived and tensions mounted in Boston. The people in Boston thought, what are all these soldiers here? They're just coming in, doing what they want. We have to take care of them, and they're making us pay taxes, and they're actually exploiting us. And so the people in Boston weren't very fond of the British soldiers. And an incident happened. It was snowing out in Boston. They get a lot of snow in Boston sometimes. And so some boys started throwing snowballs at a sentry, a British sentry in customs. And the customs were the taxes. They started throwing snowballs. And so the sentry called on the British soldiers to help him. Like, they're throwing snowballs at me, brother. So he called the British soldiers. And then an angry crowd started harassing the soldiers, saying, what are you doing to these boys? And an unknown person, probably one of the British soldiers, got very upset, or a sentry, whatever we know, and gave the orders for the British soldiers to fire on these Boston citizens, right? These people in Boston. So 3 Bostoners were dead and 2 more fatally wounded that would die later on. So 5. So not a great massacre of 5, but definitely they were unarmed. And so what really happened here? Well, so then the British troops moved out to the island to calm the city. And they calmed the city, and they decided and then basically in Boston, they thought, how are we going to deal with this? Well, there were 2 lawyers. We'll find the lawyers being John Adams and Josiah Quincy. And they were believers in justice, but not lovers of the redcoats at all. Although they wanted these soldiers to be treated fairly. They believed in justice. And so John Adams took and defended them, and 6 of the soldiers were not guilty, and two were guilty of manslaughter. So basically saying, who fired on the Boston Massacre? Well, a lot of people will criticize John Adams of defending the redcoats. But to me, it is John Adams, we find later on, became a president of the United States, and he definitely was a patriot along with his cousin Samuel Adams. But you can see he also wanted, even the redcoats considered at that time, possibly enemies, he wanted them to be tried fairly. So I think that's a good thing. But later on, we'll see what happens from this point of this Boston Massacre. It's labeled the Boston Massacre, and you can see here, Boston right now is like so up in arms, thinking, what are they going to do next? So hopefully this all, there we go. The repeal of the Townshend Acts. So remember the Townshend Acts. So now Britain's looking like, what is going on? We had this uprising. British soldiers, the soldiers fired on them without them being armed. And they thought basically a new prime minister was coming in. His name was Lord Frederick North. And in 1770, he came in, he lived 1732 to 1792, and here's a picture of him. He looks pretty young at that point when he came in. I don't know if he was that young. But anyway, he urged the repeal of the Townshend Acts. The prime minister said that, well, we need to get rid of some of these acts because basically we're really causing Americans to be rattled and come up in arms against us. And so he realized more than that. He realized the cost to enforce the acts, to make sure that they paid their taxes, were more than they were worth, because they had to hire soldiers to make sure that the Americans paid their taxes, So they repealed all the taxes except for the tax on tea. Why did they not repeal the tax on tea? Well, let me tell you why. Because they wanted to leave it there to make sure that the colonists knew the Parliament had a right to tax them if they wanted to. And so they're going to keep that tax just to remind them, yes, we will tax you if we want to. We have control of you. So between 1771 and 1773, there was a peace for just a while, as the Townshend Acts were repealed, but really we'll find they weren't really taken away. A Gaspee incident happened in 1772. So now we have the HMS Gaspee, the ship here, as a British customs ship, and it ran ground near Providence, Rhode Island. We're outside of Boston, now we're in Providence, Rhode Island. And the boat was attacked and the crew was removed and the boat was set on fire. So Rhode Islanders did this? This is kind of unusual. But the customs were coming into Rhode Island. So the British Court of Inquiry actually didn't identify any of the colonists at all. They didn't know who did it. They knew it was in Providence, Rhode Island, but they didn't know who actually set this ship on fire, or was it accidentally set on fire? Well, anyway, tensions grew. The Gaspee incident didn't help relationships with Great Britain and the United States, America. So then the United States formed committees of correspondence. And so basically Samuel Adams is involved in these committees of correspondence, as you see, and he filled the newspapers and letters about what was going on. And his warning was that this peace that we're having now is only temporary. And the real problem has not been solved in Great Britain. He said, no free people ever can exist keeping purse strings in their hands, basically saying Great Britain had purse strings. They could take anything they wanted from Americans. So colonists had never really been under the Parliament. He said the Parliament has no rights to give us laws at all in England, because the charters were between the king, and we must talk to the king, not the Parliament, and between the king and the colonists alone. And the precedent was set in Massachusetts in 1679 because basically Massachusetts had a charter to the king, not to the Parliament. So the subjects of His Majesty are not being represented in the Parliament, basically saying, King, we are not being treated fair in the Parliament. In fact, the Parliament has no say, should have no say over us altogether. So the Townshend Acts and Stamp Acts were Parliament acts, so they do not apply to the colonies. So Samuel Adams was saying basically by the law that the Americans are not having to obey any of these parliamentary laws to America, including the Townshend, and the Stamp Acts. And in doing this, he also was informing the colonies with these committees of correspondence. So the committees of correspondence came together. Boston actually established the first committee in 1772, and we're talking about, Samuel Adams involved in this. And 21 men kept the neighboring towns informed. So 21 men would go around and tell all the neighborhoods and all the people in America, the citizens and the colonists, basically telling them what was going on. America's position was known not only in America, but in the whole world because of these informing. The colonies went worldwide. So even in other parts of the world, in France and in Holland and the Dutch and in Spain, they all thought, what is going on here? And seeing how the Americans were being treated unfairly. Now down to Virginia. Remember, we talked about Rhode Island and the Gatsby event. We talked about Boston event. Now we're going to Virginia. So Virginia's House of Burgesses, which was their legal house where they made their laws, and they followed Boston, saying, yes, we are behind what you say in Boston with your committees of correspondence, and we agree we should not be taxed by the Parliament. And so the Virginian leaders stood up. And who were these leaders? You would know them for sure in Virginia. So they stood up beside the Bostonian, Samuel Adams. Here's a picture of Samuel Adams and his committees of correspondence to pass information around. And so here we have, of course, Patrick Henry. We have the young Thomas Jefferson. And we have Richard Henry Lee. These two top Virginians coming in and saying, yes, we are behind Boston. And Patrick Henry here, we see him, of course, giving his speech on how we need to stand together in unity in America. The committee's a vital role in America's struggle for freedom. So they were to keep the colonists informed and to unite them for the common purpose. Basically, we need to stick together. We need to stick together with the colonists of Great Britain. Independence would not be unlawful revolt of disorganized rioters. So basically, some of them are thinking we need to be independent from England, but we're not going to do it by rioting. We're going to do it lawfully, but a calm and deliberate, well-organized action of a free people. We want to do it so it's lawfully, so it's just, so it's a calm and deliberate. We want to deal with England not as rioters would, not disorganized. So they did. They did not want any anarchy. No anarchy would be present in the struggle for her independence. So if America and requiring independence was not going to be confused, it was basically going to be a lawful, just struggle away from Great Britain. The Boston Tea Party. So I'm going to stop there because then we're going to go into the Boston Tea Party and all, because now Boston is going to be the center of all of this turmoil that was going on with Great Britain, and Great Britain owning lots of colonies all over the world at that time, and little Boston standing up on its own before America was even America. So let's stop there and we're going to start in the next video.